All right. Good afternoon, delivery enthusiasts and curious fleet managers, and really everyone else joining us from around the world today. Before we get started, a little housekeeping. We have a couple of polls that will be popping up during the course of the webinar, including one that's up right now. Please take note, share your thoughts as you see fit, and we'll also be concluding our hour with some Q&A. So please, I encourage everyone to submit questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom app. And with that, and without further ado, we'll get some introductions of our webinar guests. But first, for those who don't know me, my name is Andrew Miles. I'm the head of our partnerships at Joyride, and I work on a couple of other special projects, one of which is our delivery as a service platform. Before Joyride, I did start my journey in shared micromobility on the operations side with a US-based operator. And really there, I got kind of a firsthand look at how creative fleet partnerships can kind of work with willing merchants and private property developers for local delivery. And I've kind of been hooked ever since, which leads me to this point, 5 years later. Today, I'm joined by Ksenia Proka, the co-founder of e-bike delivery rental fleet operator Whizz out of New York City, and Jonah Bliss, the founder and I think, as he likes to say, the chief curb whisperer at Curbivore. Ksenia and Jonah, if you wouldn't mind just hopping on and sharing a quick background and bio of yourself and kind of your journey into your current role. Ksenia, I'll kind of throw it to you first.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ksenia, and I'm one of the co-founders of Whizz. We're an electric bike rental services designed specifically for delivery drivers in New York City. We actually started our operations about 1.5 years ago when we launched in February last year with our first e-bikes, and we've grown since then to around 1,000 electric bikes being in rent currently in New York City. We're a subscription-based business, so we also provide maintenance and repairs for our customers. And if talking about a little bit about my background, so before Whizz, I developed a similar company that I exited last year. It was also a subscription-based rental business, but not only for delivery drivers, but mostly for B2C customers, where we rented out different equipment, starting with electronics and also mobility, e-scooters and electric bikes. However, during the COVID, we realized that mobility for delivery drivers is where the most growth can be achieved, and that's how I ended up with this.
Excellent. Thank you, Ksenia. Jonah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Jonah Bliss. Recognize some names in the attendee box. I run Curbivore, which is a community, including an annual gathering, weekly news service, industry meetups focused on the curb. So, delivery, curb management, mobility, the use of outdoor public space, and sort of created the Curbivore community in response to the pandemic. So it's been, 3+ years now. My original background is generally in mobility startups, helping scale kind of alternative transportation services. So with that framing, really saw how the curb was just such an important point for everyone, and we're kind of fighting over a little slice of asphalt. So we could either work together and it'd be a success, or we could all be fighting for scraps. So we think that by bringing together startups, incumbents, restaurants, public sector people, private sector people, basically everyone that's got a case for owning the curb, we can get better outcomes for everyone.
Thanks, Jonah. Appreciate that. Before we kind of dive into the conversation, I want to paint a little bit of kind of my interpretation of the delivery landscape as I've kind of seen it evolve from the late 20th century to today, specifically kind of in the Western world, maybe more pointedly North America. Everyone here views just a lifetime of delivery that is really last mile trucks and vans, large UPS, FedEx type vehicles, now kind of Amazon Prime vehicles that are hauling thousands of pounds of parcels and other perishable goods from mega distribution centers all over a city all day long. And each stop of the way, this truck is popping in the middle of the street, turning their hazard lights on, going to someone's door or up in a building, dropping off whatever the goods are and coming back and continuing on down the road while traffic is kind of held up, or like a stone in a creek, it's diverting around that. And it doesn't seem very efficient, and we started to see, I'd say maybe some small tremors, if not maybe some seismic shifts in kind of that modus operandi in recent years, particularly I'd say driven by the changes during the pandemic. But I kind of love to get both your thoughts on kind of what do you think, is kind of the major transitory, dominoes falling right now as it relates to kind of that paradigm shift in last mile delivery vehicles specifically. And then really, what kind of operation do you think is driving the demand the most? Is Uber Eats and food delivery? Is it parcel delivery with like UPS or something else? And so whoever wants to take that first.
Okay, I can take it. So I think, yes, that the pandemic was one of the main driving forces behind the last mile delivery, although, of course, it started to surge before the pandemic, but the pandemic was just the catalyzer of all those trends that we currently see. And we know that customers, they get used to some good stuff pretty fast. And even when the pandemic was not that bad, they had these expectations. And according to some researchers, more than 60% of customers expect their free delivery to be managed within 3 business days, which is a pretty short period of time. And more than 80% of customers expect their delivery to be guaranteed. And it's a very high expectations that the businesses should work with right now. And it's not only about the B2C customers, but also about the B2B customers who order some stuff and they want their deliveries to be fast and guaranteed. So as this expectation formed, it's very hard to offer something else to customers right now. So the delivery sector should deal with these new trends. However, currently, the cost of last mile delivery is more than 50% of the whole delivery cost of the whole supply chain, which is very large. And it is the most carbon intense part of the delivery. So I think all of this influences delivery companies very much because they need to reduce the cost of the delivery and they need to decrease the carbon footprint of the delivery. That's where new light electric vehicles and electric vehicles start to become more popular because the main thing of these new transportation modes is to decrease the cost, to increase to meet the expectations of the customers, to decrease the delays, to decrease the risk of the delivery not taking place on time, and also to decrease the carbon footprint because it's really hard, to convince the customer that delivery of food, some piece of pizza with the car using gas is something that is sustainable. So I think all those trends are driving the last mile delivery right now. And if we talk about the sector, I would say it's mainly food delivery and especially grocery delivery. According to some data, the grocery delivery this year will grow by almost 30%, while last mile delivery in total grows by around 10-15%, and the food delivery in total grows by 15% per year.
Interesting. You actually piqued my interest on something. I think we all as consumers have gotten hooked on kind of free delivery, or at least the advertisement of free delivery, most notably with things like Amazon Prime. But we all know that we work in the space, and I think even consumers know nothing's free. The price is just built in somewhere else into that operation. Do you think with the current trends and costs that you just mentioned, do you think that companies, either the large scale app suppliers like Amazon or the actual fleet operators, will be able to continue to offer free delivery just because consumers are hooked? Or do you think that we're going to have to start charging face value delivery costs and just consumers have to deal with it?
I think right now, the delivery companies, especially in the food industry sector, they are searching for the profitability. It's very important for them, especially with the venture market is not when it is not doing really well. And of course, they're going to transfer, some free delivery into some other costs. of course, this will happen, but I don't think it's going to be a problem because it seems like customers are willing to pay for fast and guaranteed delivery. And I've seen like this article about DoorDash, about how they performed in the first quarter of this year. Actually, like despite like not very great economic condition, customers continue to pay for like the delivery, even with increased prices. And I don't think that it's going to change. Like it's very hard, you know, to start going to the supermarket again when you are just used that everything is delivered to your door. So probably the customers will just continue to pay, even if like there is going to be some increase in the prices.
Jonah, what are you kind of seeing in your world? You kind of connect a lot of the different aspects of the industry. You kind of seeing the same things?
Yeah. So on the most recent question, you know, the free delivery thought. Yeah, I mean, I think there's such different supply chains for if you're doing an e-commerce, you know, an Amazon package, you know, it's going from a distribution hub to a, you know, sort of sorting center and then to you, versus if you're a DoorDash or a grocery delivery that's coming from 3 miles away. So I think the Amazons of the world, even though they lose money on, you know, each free delivery, it's such a sticky revenue driver, right? Like Prime is just so ingrained in everything they do now that like I'm not worried about that going away for better or for worse. So, you know, you're not going to be seeing any fewer parcel vans. But yeah, I think on the restaurant level, I mean, honestly, most of those aren't even free, right? They just hide the fee so you can't even tell how much it costs. So I think they're going to continue to kind of pull the levers and see what they can do to achieve profitability. And a lot of them have, you know, rolled out their plus or you know, whatever they want to call their sort of premium subscription services. But even then, it's generally still just a discount. But then the original question, right? Like what's affecting delivery generally? I think there's 2 recent trends that I think are particularly telling. On the macro level, we have just the surge of federal spending, right? After a long time without a lot of money going into space, the feds are kind of cutting checks. Obviously, a lot of it is towards EVs on the, you know, car van size, and that's better than a gas burning car. But it would be great if some of that went towards bikes and smaller devices. So, you know, there's still options that might make that happen, but that's generally happening more on the local level. You know, Denver, for example. But even if there's not money being poured into specific vehicles, you know, there's some programs that I think people really need to watch, like the Smart Grant Collaborative, which was announced a couple months ago, which is, I want to say 8 different cities that are using DOT money to launch sort of, you know, zero emissions delivery zones or similar kind of management zones. We can get into that in a little bit, but I think that's an exciting one to watch. And then on a micro level, one thing I think is really interesting we saw just last week was Domino's throwing in the towel and finally going on to Uber Eats. And so for those that don't watch food delivery that closely, one, like Domino's is the big daddy delivery, like the sort of biggest by revenue. 2, you know, they've prided themselves on being innovators in the space before we were born, right? Like they and Pizza Hut were doing online delivery in the 90s, you know, phone delivery before that. So essentially moving away from their own first-party system to a third-party system is, I think, shows just how dominant the 3PLs have gotten, 3PDs have gotten. But what was sort of, I think, missed by some of the coverage was that, at least at this stage, they're just using Uber Eats as marketing. They're still going to do all the fulfillment themselves. You can still use the pizza tracker to see as they're charring your pizza. And so I think that's interesting because they're still struggling with the driver shortage, as many are, but they aren't willing to give up the sort of control of the consumer experience right now. And I think that's telling, right? Because we've all had so many bad delivery experiences, and Domino's, even though, you know, let's be honest, it's not the world's greatest pizza, like they want to make sure it's coming in the hot bag at the right time so it's consistent. And that's more than you can say about a lot of the other deliveries you get out there.
That's interesting. It's a good thing to bring up Domino's. You know, when I was in college, I used to work for Sears, which prior to that time was considered a bellwether for the economy. It was, you look at Sears and stock market, and that's how you view the U.S. economy. But I think you're, you know, very, very nose on the head right there with the call out for Domino's being kind of that for the delivery. They've been doing this for so long. They've built their own cars. They've had their own kind of unique heating ovens and bags, and they've always been experimenting. I think it's kind of different in different regions of the U.S. and Canada when it comes to Domino's, in that where I live in the South, we have actually a really big marketing campaign from Domino's to actually pay you or give you points to come pick up. So they're actually trying to get away from delivery altogether because of the suburban nature of kind of our city designs. And they've kind of realized, I guess, maybe even if we do have very efficient or as efficient as possible localized delivery, it's still not profitable enough for someone else just to come in. But in other areas like New York City or even maybe LA, where you have just more distribution, that it still is more popular and more efficient to deliver. Do you see that this being kind of a regional kind of play with food delivery in general, whether it's done, in-house or by kind of an aggregator like Uber Eats?
Yeah. I mean, the Domino's play is interesting. I mean, they've really struggled with like a labor shortage, labor retention issues lately, as many companies have. But yeah, so that sort of push to change customer behaviors to come pick it up and save a couple bucks or get it, credit towards your next meal. I think that's a very tactical response to a problem they're having. I mean, we've seen like their revenue numbers the last couple quarters haven't been great, so it's a struggle. I think, the Canada thing is like no one wants to eat inside of a Domino's. It's like eating at an ATM. So it's like you're going there to pick it and bring it up, whereas at least a Pizza Hut, if anyone's been there in a long time, like, yeah, those kind of feel like a restaurant still, at least some of them. So I think Domino's is really struggling with this new normal about labor. And I think that's like, to me, like the big kind of factor in general. Like, that's why you see some restaurants or e-commerce brands just like spray and pray and make 1,000 partnerships and just sort of click every button until someone comes and picks the thing, and that might move your meal or your object from A to B, but not on time, not reliably, not consistently. And so I think until people are willing to invest a little bit more and pay their workers a little bit more, you're not going to get a great consumer experience.
It's interesting you just brought up paying your workers more. That's been kind of a hot button issue, especially in Ksenia's backyard in New York City. There's been legislation proposed and judicials kind of trying to counter it with minimum wages on delivery workers. Do you see that as actually being beneficial for the end consumer? And when we're talking about the kind of the user journey or the product journey, do you think that actually the consumers are being harmed by some of that legislation? Or in the long run, do you think this is a boon for actually all players within the value chain, Ksenia?
Well, I think, like, of course, first when we heard those news, we thought that it's pretty bad for the industry and especially for delivery apps because they are struggling to become profitable, and the salary of delivery drivers is one of the largest cost for delivery apps. But I think there is some positive side as well, because with this higher payments, minimum wage, for delivery drivers, for delivery companies, it's going to be easier to attract delivery drivers to get the job. And so that's what we observed, in the Google Trends. We saw after the news was announced, there was the huge surge in the inquiries about working Uber Eats, working DoorDash, and I think it's going to decrease the costs of delivery driver acquisition, which are pretty high as well. So I'm not sure which influence will outperform, and so on this it will depend how it is going to impact the customers. But of course, if it will increase the cost for delivery apps, they are going to somehow transfer that to the customers, I think. And probably if it will affect the number of delivery drivers working for the apps, this may also cause some quality decrease in the service. So let's see. I've heard that Uber Eats and DoorDash, they actually suing the government right now because of this legislation. So it seems that they are not really satisfied with it. But I think that there are positive things as well, because with the minimum wage, delivery drivers are going to consider the job as a delivery driver something more permanent. They are not going to switch their jobs too often, meaning that for delivery companies, they will get the drivers who work for them for some longer period of times, and the cost for acquisition will be much lower.
I'm a big believer myself in in-house operations, so I'd love to see that take shape if the unit economics can kind of play out in terms of kind of driver or rider pay. So we'll see. Yeah, it is a hot topic right now, so time will tell. Kind of want to switch gears a little bit, but drill down even more kind of in your backyards. Jonah, you mentioned that there's a lot of federal funding in the U.S. coming into play right now. And even without that, you both live in the two largest cities in the U.S. Very different. I mean, Jonah, obviously L.A., Kinsey and New York, those are kind of polar opposites in design and kind of density. Jonah, I mean, you live in LA, which is arguably, I think it's the largest by square miles, the largest metropolitan area in the U.S. And the greater LA communities are quite sprawling, have been for many decades. Delivery can be a challenge when, jokes aside, the 405 can be pretty problematic to travel on. You have a lot of congestion out there. But you also have a lot of active players on the municipal side trying to enact new programs or enticing startups to implement new types of services or pilot proofs of concept out there to really improve the logistical landscape. So, what do you see kind of is kind of, I don't say winning the day, but what do you see as the most attractive type of pilots that are being involved, and what type of policies do you think are most promising from like the municipal level?
Yeah, well, I would say, first, if you're ordering a pizza and it has to take the 405, it's going to be cold by the time it gets there. But no, it's, I think what makes LA such a fascinating metropolis for this, I mean, a lot of people don't appreciate that it's, the polycentricity makes it very dense on a regional level. So both from a cultural, but also from like a sort of demographic standpoint, there's no Manhattan, but there's like a million, Brooklyns or Queens, or, sort of picture the downtown in any other mid-sized, medium, large city. There's dozens, if not 100 of those. And so you have these kind of local points of interest with even sort of denser nodes of connections and businesses you might want delivery from, and congestion, as compared to sort of a New York, where you see sort of Manhattan here and then the other boroughs, and then Long Island and Connecticut and New Jersey, just sort of sprawling nothing lands, no offense to Long Islanders, where there's sort of far less that you'd want delivered, right? So I think in that sense, there's a lot to learn from LA, because you can apply it just in so many different domains. And so two particular programs that are really interesting, Santa Monica has been doing a zero emissions delivery pilot for over a year now. And I think that one, there's been a lot of learnings from about trying to get participation from the bigger carriers and the people that, you can flag down the local delivery driver and say, follow these rules, but trying to get that all the way up to corporate is another matter. And then a similar program is in the works also for downtown LA as part of the Smart Grant Collaborative that I mentioned. And then there's just sort of other neighborhoods that are sort of working on related initiatives. One in sort of Warner Center, which is like another kind of late modernist towers in the park downtown. So I think there's just like so many examples that any other city can say, oh, let's look at what worked in that neighborhood and apply it to our Main Street.
Okay, Ksenia, same kind of question, but I mean the density's kind of flipped, and as Jonah mentioned, Manhattan, where you're located. Every time I've gone to New York, I still see a ton of delivery vans. But every time in the last decade, I've seen more and more e-bikes or bikes in general just pop up, or mopeds. You're the e-bike company. New York has had some, let's say some infamous kind of bike pathway designs and some implementations that maybe are a little more dangerous for the average rider than you would want to see. Where does your fleet come in, and do you see the current New York City DOT actually working towards crafting new infrastructure projects and policies that safeguard kind of e-bike delivery riders?
Yeah, I think like the main problem with New York City was that before 2020, if I'm not mistaken, the electric bikes were like totally banned there. And so that's how like some Chinese manufacturers appeared who started selling those e-bikes illegally. And because of like the fines were not so large, the they managed to conquer the largest share of the market. And if you come to New York, you will definitely see that about 90% of all the electric bikes used by the delivery drivers is of the same model. It's some kind of the cheaper electric bike, but with a very large battery, and that's why delivery drivers prefer those bikes. But of course, they are dangerous because they are cheap, and especially because the batteries are cheap. And it's been a very large concern among New York City authorities because a lot of fires happen. Last year, I think there were around 300 fires that took place in New York City, and they cause deaths sometimes. So that's why New York City currently is targeted at strengthening the regulation. So it's about, first of all, the certification of the batteries that is going to become mandatory starting the end of September. So all the bikes and batteries should be certified. It's also about the development infrastructure, especially the charging infrastructure, because delivery drivers, they usually work full shift, and they need several batteries. And while they're on the shift, they leave the batteries charging at the apartments, and it's pretty dangerous. And so New York City is willing to organize the infrastructure where there are those charging stations that would provide the delivery drivers with the possibility to swap batteries during the day. It's pretty actually developed in some Asia countries. So swapping batteries are pretty developed, in countries like Indonesia, for example, in China, but there is no such infrastructure in New York City at all. And currently there are several pilot projects that are targeted in researching how this space can be organized in New York City, how these charging stations could be installed around Manhattan, around Brooklyn, and so on. And I think New York City is pretty interested in making all the infrastructure safer for delivery drivers. There are plans to build new protected bike lanes around the city, especially in some underserved areas where many delivery drivers live. So I think there are going to be many changes in the coming years that will facilitate some better changes to increase delivery driver safety.
Yeah, I just want to hop on that one for a second, Andrew. Yeah, I think the hardware is such a important question, right? To Ksenia's point, the famous, the New York City delivery e-bike for many years, and still is the Arrow, has these little vestigial fake pedals that so it looks like you're pedaling, so it's compliance with the old law, but I don't think you could actually move the bike that heavy with a Barbie pedal. And so interesting to see, there was innovation there as a kind of regulatory hack, but where there's really been a lack of innovation, or if anything, I guess a lack of standardization, is charging, right? A big problem with the e-bike batteries and the battery fires is just, so many of these batteries are sort of different, non-standard, and once you have it, you don't know what it is, but they all take that old school little barrel connector plug. You just sort of put some power in and hope that's the right amperage, wattage, whatever, and walk away and pray a little bit. So the lack of a defined standard or a sort of smart controller model for batteries, most smaller consumer electrics, you sort of use USB to charge it these days, but that doesn't deliver enough power to deliver to charge an e-bike in a reasonable time. So I think there's a need for a consortium to develop some sort of standard for that, or figure that problem in a way that the other upside would be instead of having to have your perfect charger for your battery, you could just go somewhere and there'd be a charger that fits. That's a win-win. And so I think I can understand how it's happened, right? It's a collective action error, but it's really surprising to me that even some of the larger e-bike players continue to just sort of ship, obviously less dangerous, but still kind of schlocky batteries. I mean, I don't want to pick on anyone, but my wife has a rad power bike, and I remember once the battery wouldn't charge, and so I'm handy. I'm tinkering with it. I'm looking at the charger and the battery itself, and there's a little fuse box, and I have to wedge a dowel into it to get the fuse cover off. It just has this the same fuses that you put in a car, and just put this in and following instructions from the web, and the house hasn't burnt down yet, but that doesn't really reassure me that was the sanctioned process.
That's interesting. I was going to bring up kind of fleet vehicle hardware maybe a little later in the conversation, but I'm glad we kind of touched upon it. The safety aspect has become quite noteworthy of late. New York City's been, the news has been reporting on a number of the fires, as Ksenia, you mentioned. Knowing that from a fleet operations management standpoint, you guys have to be ahead of the curve with that. You have to mitigate risks. You have to anticipate kind of vehicle defects, becoming an issue for you. How does Whizz go about your fleet selection? How do you go about, sourcing OEMs, manufacturers, and where do you see kind of the evolution of kind of some of the form factors you're using now going into the future, as it meets the kind of needs of delivery riders in New York City?
Yeah, of course, as an operator of a very large fleet, we need to follow all these the regulatory measures that are in place, and to take all the precaution measures, starting with the batteries that we purchase from the manufacturers, and ending up with the operational side, how we store those batteries, what we do with the damaged batteries, because we rent out electric bikes for a long period of time. So it's not like the sharing model. So our customers rent them with us for a month or more. And of course, we cannot guarantee how they charge those batteries. They may go and purchase the cheap charger that is not compatible with our batteries. They may damage the battery. And the only thing we can do is to inform them how to do it properly, to ask them to come for maintenance regularly, so we can check that the bike and the battery is okay. If we talk about the technology, I think a lot of opportunities lie in the battery manufacturers about using some safer materials, because most of electric bikes are currently powered by lithium-ion batteries, which are dangerous, and you can't do anything about it. It can be a battery of a better quality or of a poorer quality, but no battery will guarantee you that it won't be damaged at some point and won't explode. So I think there is a lot to for manufacturers to investigate in the fields of some other types of batteries that are safer, that has less risk of some fires or of explosion. And there are already some companies that operate in those fields, that work with, for example, phosphate batteries and other types of batteries, including fast charging batteries and so on. So, of course, we as the rental company, we follow all those news about new technology and try to be try to upgrade our electric bikes all the time. But again, still, I don't think there exists any battery that has the zero risk of explosion. So you just need to take all the precautionary measures, but no one will guarantee you that this cannot happen.
So if you were to, take a step back a few years, even before your previous venture, and knowing what you know now, would you, in evaluating a fleet purchase, put the most diligence on kind of what the battery is, who manufactures it, and I think to Jonah's point, kind of the actual charging mechanism? Are those kind of key factors that you think are, often overlooked, that you, definitely pay attention to more now?
I would say that we always paid a lot of attention to the quality of the parts of the bikes, and we upgrade our fleet all the time. So as a rental company, the key advantage that we have compared to the companies who sell the bike is that we get a lot of feedback from our customers, because our customers, for example, who rent an electric bike for a month, they may come to our location several times during this month, and we see what parts of the bikes are good, what are not. We can see how the batteries perform and so on, and we can provide with all this feedback our manufacturer, asking them to upgrade the batteries, so that's minimize the risk of them being damaged. But I wouldn't say that when we started this business, we didn't pay attention to the batteries quality, because it's one of the most important parts of the bike.
Jonah, do you want to chime in there?
I'm curious, not to turn this advertorial, but Andrew, Joyride maintains the Joyride garage of kind of options of bikes that you guys can make available to your partners. And obviously you collect all sorts of data on the behavior of your fleets, your customers' fleets, and which specific vehicles correspond to that. So I'm curious, how do you guys think about, managing this diverse array of mobility devices?
It's kind of a rock and a hard place for a vast majority of our customers, especially on the kind of people sharing side of things. It's really a limited selection of commercial ready sharing units from a limited number of suppliers. And you're really limited as a fleet purchaser from what those OEMs and manufacturers have already sourced for batteries. Many of those kind of companies, like Segway is probably the most notorious there in terms of recognition, have multiple types of batteries that you can get that are, a generic, as they would say, like Chinese cell, which may be from a less than reputable or internationally recognized kind of firm, but it's going to be cheaper. Then you might have an option of like a Panasonic or LG or Samsung, some of the larger brand names that we're used to and maybe have a little more trust in. But it still is Ksenia mentioned, you're still working with lithium ion right now, and there's going to be bad batches no matter what. That's just part of working with that material. And from kind of a safety mitigation aspect that I always try to preach is if you can, invest in a battery management system so you can actually have real-time data and sensory technology built into those batteries, knowing the life cycles, the vehicle or the battery health at any given time, and when to either have an end of life upcycling or decommissioning of that battery. Or if you can tell that a newer battery might have a fault in it, you can just take that out of circulation and de-risk an explosion or a kind of fire happening. I'd say I keep my eye on as many battery projects as possible that are going around with new materials, but most of those are 3 to 5, sometimes more years out from seeing prototypes get into mass production for mostly solid state batteries, where you can take out a liquid electrolyte that's in most lithium ions. And I think that's going to be the same for EVs as well. So I think we're seeing the same kind of technologies being played out in both e-bike or moped, or as you see in like EVs through the likes of Tesla or Ford or GM right now. And we're just kind of waiting for the price of some of the new technologies to come down to be built in the form factors we've used. So I'd say it's really about risk mitigation in my aspect and in my estimation right now, and how we try to preach preventative maintenance and prescriptive maintenance so you can get ahead of problems before they actually become real issues. But it's a challenge, and it really takes more boots on the ground. It's not just a technology factor. You can have all the software systems and the data in front of you, but you really have to have the operational policies in place to make sure you're checking things in real time and not just relying on sensors to say, binary, this is good, this isn't. And easier said than done, right?
Yeah, certainly.
I really love talking about the vehicle hardware, and kind of we're seeing this. Jonas, you mentioned a couple of different kind of pilots in Santa Monica and LA writ large, and Ksenia, you mentioned that the city of New York is implementing some kind of battery swapping and other types of infrastructure pilots right now to combat some of these things. But regardless of the battery types, the proper delivery vehicle, really has to meet what the actual product it's delivering. You obviously can't deliver a refrigerator on the back of an e-bike. That's not happening anytime soon. Likely not doing that on a moped either. Food delivery, small parcel delivery, yes. Where do you see the actual modal selection fitting in? Are fleet owners going to need to be multimodal, or should they really stick to their lane, pick a form factor, and just target specific, very bespoke merchants or merchant aggregators for like-minded goods for the end riders to deliver? Either of you take that one, or both.
I would say that there should be a choice of the vehicle, because it not only depends on the type of goods that you deliver. Of course, it depends on that, but also on the city and the country where you operate. Even in New York City, in Manhattan, we mainly see electric bikes, but if you go to Brooklyn, it's more about electric mopeds or just gas mopeds. And so you cannot find a solution that will fit all the needs. What I would like to mention is that there are different types of new electric vehicles that's appearing in the space. However, it's also about the regulation. I will just give you some example, in New York City, Amazon, and other companies that deliver some larger amount of goods. They usually use like electric bike with the cargo trailer that's attached to the electric bikes. And we have been investigating like if we could manufacture those like cargo trailers to provide our customers with. And we always end up with a regulation because, like, of course, you would like this cargo trailer to be also powered because if it's like some heavy delivery, you cannot only rely on electric bikes. You cannot have this battery that would last like for so long. But when it comes to the powered cargo trailer, there is no definition of this in New York City, and you do not know if it is allowed to use it or not. So it's always like, you know, you struggle with like these new types of electric vehicles because in some cities they may be allowed, in some cities they are not, and sometimes there is no such definition of this new type of vehicle at all. So I think there should be done a lot in terms of regulation for these new types of vehicles to appear if the government really want to support, like, you know, these new types of last mile vehicles and electric vehicles.
Yeah, I think, Andrew, I imagine anyone watching this webinar is probably thinking about, you know, a fleet with multiple locations, multiple workers and vehicles per location. So, you know, hard to say, you know, if you're Joe or Jane Schmo and you have one store, like it's a different boat, obviously. But yeah, there's the right vehicle for the right job. I think obviously it's good to standardize your fleet in the sense that you don't want 1,000 different similar things because that's a maintenance and reliability and purchasing nightmare. But yeah, I would think, you know, for certain locations are going to change the mix, but you're going to need, you know, whether it's an electric van or, you know, in a better world, a little pedal, you know, trike van for long distance. You're going to want, you know, electric bike or electric moped for medium distance. And then, you know, in certain geographies, you can do a little delivery bot, which I'm fond of for certain use cases too. So I think, you know, you find the right mix, you figure out what they work best for, you collect the data and see, okay, like it's faster to do X over Y distance, it's faster to do this one if it's going east but not west. And then, yeah, if you have sufficient volume, you can kind of orchestrate a multimodal solution.
Yeah,
okay,
probably,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would also add that preferences of delivery companies and drivers play a large role. If you like go to Europe, you would see like all kinds of cargo bikes that we do not see, for example, in New York City. And what's funny is that, like, especially when you work directly with delivery drivers, preferences play a large role because you wouldn't be able to offer them something that they are not familiar with. They communicate a lot with each other and they see that, like, for example, their friends use this type of electric bikes. They don't want anything else. And it's funny, like in different cities, like in Europe or in the United States, like the largest share usually belongs to some particular type of electric bike, which can differ a lot. Like, for example, if you go to Milan or you are in New York City, but if you are within New York City, like 80% of bikes will be this kind of like aero bikes that Jonah talked about. So yeah, preferences play the large role in deciding what type of transportation to offer to delivery drivers or to delivery companies.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time before Q&A, but I kind of want to piggyback off that and get kind of a one final thought from each of you. You know, speaking of all these trends within the market that we've covered, you know, Ksenia, if you were to give one piece of advice to an existing fleet manager, not competing with you in New York City, of course, but that is looking to maybe transition from an automobile fleet to e-bikes or other types of electrified fleets, or just a new venture, someone who has much capital and they want to get into the space, what's like that one piece of advice you'd recommend?
Well, I would say they're different for like fleet operators and new ventures. For the fleet operators, I would suggest just to test first because like you never know, like it depends on the city, it depends on which industry you operate with. try to rent several electric bikes and to see how it works. Don't go with purchasing like the large fleet of electric bikes before you test if it's gonna be like a suitable transportation for your company or not. And if we talk about new ventures in the field, I would mostly focus on the opportunities in the infrastructure around electric bikes, because there are like a lot of new companies appearing in this space in terms of manufacturing, rental, and sales of electric bikes, but infrastructure is still lagging behind when we talk about like batteries charging, maintenance of electric bikes, and so on. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to find in this space.
Jonah, would you agree that that market gap of infrastructure is kind of the one people should take advantage of, or is there some other element that you think is not being talked about enough or no one's really tackling at the moment in the delivery space?
Yeah, I think the infrastructure gap is critical, and I would encourage anyone listening to get involved. Like, I think this is our shared responsibility to push our municipalities to invest in curb management and bike lanes and bus lanes and kind of smart loading zones. It's selfishly it should make your life better, but it should actually make everyone's life better once they get over that initial hurdle. Change is scary, but and I think even some sort of narrowly focused retailers, restaurants don't understand that, like, oh, if I have to pay more to park in this loading zone now, that's bad. But like, no, having guaranteed access to a loading zone is good, even if you have to spend 50 more cents than you did before and no longer risk getting a ticket. So to me, that's really like the big collective hurdle we have to get over. And I think that will just allow such a further blossoming of interesting and sort of more socially responsible vehicle types, in the sense that if it's safer and easier and more legal to use them, we're going to see that blossom.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for the first 45 minutes of this. I want to kind of throw it to Q&A right now. So please, everyone, throw in your questions in the Q&A if you haven't done so already. I'm going to pop in here and throw one out. This one I bet I could probably throw to Ksenia. Let's say, how do you deal with vehicle theft? This is something that is a major issue worldwide. What kind of insurance protection mechanisms are you using?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, when we just launched in February last year and started to grow, I think that we encountered this problem in May, and it was a really huge problem because every day somebody reported their bikes to be stolen. Of course, we provide different protection to our customers, including we provide a free U-lock. We have an integrated GPS and IoT system that allows us to locate the bike, to deactivate it remotely if it's stolen, and so on. But that was not the key thing that helped us with it. Actually, informing the customers to treat their bike properly was what helped us. On the third day of our rental, we just started sending those text messages to the customers saying listen, you need to actually lock your bike when you leave it unattended. If you leave it for a prolonged period of time, you just need to take out batteries, because sometimes you go around New York City and delivery drivers, they just leave their bikes like this with a battery inside without the U-lock, and someone even leaves the smartphone in the bike because they think nothing is going to happen within 2 minutes when I'm going to just to grab my order. But it's not going to work like that. So we started sending out those messages, and the theft rate decreased dramatically. It decreased almost 5 times after we started this information campaign, because we said if you do not have the protection plan with us, you're going to cover the full cost of the bike if it's stolen. And they just started treating their bikes better. So informing the customers about how you need to treat the bikes, about that, there is this problem in the area where you work, bikes can be stolen, helped us a lot.
So really just offer kind of rental insurance off the beginning, and then just a low impact communication strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. This one, I guess, maybe really piggybacks off Jonah's last point about robots. Jonah, do you think most, if not all, deliveries in the future will be carried out autonomously with sidewalk rovers, flying drones, automated storage lockers?
I wonder who asked that one. No, so I think that's a great question. And we actually run a restaurant kind of delivery and automation site called Automate. So sort of we think about that a lot. So there's parts of that I'm more bullish on, parts that I'm still a little, yet to see like the convincing business case. I think, taking those one by one, automatic storage lockers. I mean, it's not really full autonomy. It's sort of the end of the worker puts it in the box, the Amazon locker. Yeah, I think those are here to stay. They make sense from a unit economic standpoint. If you live in a large apartment, makes sense. Even in New York, they started to experiment with municipal parcel lockers. So easy. That one's a yes. I think the sidewalk delivery bots, I've gotten more bullish on as time's gone by. More and more companies have started saying that they are profitable on a per delivery basis, not necessarily like cash flow positive, but within sight. And so I think, there's probably too many of them right now, right? There's like 20 different ones. So that'll kind of merge down. But there's just certain densities where it makes sense, right? Like they're not going to cross a 20-lane, Texas road, and they probably also don't make sense, in like the densest, in central Paris or downtown Lower Manhattan, because there's too much foot traffic that they're just like you're going to be kind of stuck because they're overly courteous. But I think for medium density shopping districts and restaurant districts, they're price competitive. I'm still a little skeptical about aerial drones for non-specialized purposes. Like they make sense for maybe like super pivotal medical deliveries, or if you're in a war zone or a developing country where you don't have the infrastructure, sure. But like in general, it's like a lot of energy, there's a lot of regulation. You need a place to take off and land. So it's hard to see how that makes up for the kind of increased price, but they're still tinkering, so we'll see.
That's true. I mean, I live in Walmart country, and I mean, they pilot all that stuff around here. So drone deliveries are pretty common. It is interesting, but yeah, it's crazy to kind of think about really taking off.
No pun intended.
Yeah, true. Ksenia, we have one specific to Whizz. What percentage of Whizz customers or gig workers take advantage of the additional services such as overnight storage and extra batteries?
Yeah, actually, extra batteries are pretty like of high demand with our company because, like as I already said, there is like the larger capacity the battery has, the larger the battery should be itself, and it's really hard, to find a battery that suits electric bikes that will enable you to like work the full shift without recharging it. So many customers actually are interested in the second batteries, and that's why we are pretty interested in this swapping batteries infrastructure, so that instead of like carrying with them the second battery, which is pretty heavy, they could just use like those battery swapping stations to swap like the battery that is dead to the battery that is fully charged. So I would say like even with our limited supply of extra batteries, most of them are rented out. I would say more than 50% of our customers rent 2 batteries. As for the overnight storage, we see like the service is pretty attractive, but unfortunately we are not able to provide a lot of spaces in the locations that we currently have. All the spaces that we have, they are fully occupied, but we are pretty limited in terms of the supply side for this service. But I would say this type of service is also attractive because many delivery drivers, they, for example, live in Brooklyn and they work in Manhattan, and for them it's not really convenient, to take the bike from Brooklyn to Manhattan and back. So they would like to store it with us. So both of those services are of high demand.
Okay. This one, I don't know who to direct it to. Maybe whoever feels they have a good answer. What do you think about the Saudi Arabia market? I'd probably tailor that to say the Saudi Arabian delivery market. So anyone who wants to take that one?
I've never been there. It's hard to say.
I can't make a super smart opinion. I'm aware that at least with the Saudi Arabian ride hail market, that's kind of not thought to be well managed, like in terms of the regulations. It's only available to Saudi citizens. As such, there's like really limited driver pool, so you get a lot of declined rides. It's sort of I think a lot of execs have obviously, without their name attributed, sort of said it's like a hot mess. So I would imagine a similar thing applies to deliveries in terms of just regulatory. I think it's not necessarily as constrained, but it's a tough market and obviously a tough geography to be outdoor doing deliveries in. So
yeah, I guess for what it's worth, from our experience on the software side and knowing operators that work there, not necessarily strictly in delivery, but the seasonality can be not just within the months of, obviously, July, August right now, it's extremely hot in Saudi Arabia. And so daytime operations can be limited. But even just during random days, if it's too hot, you just can't, or there's maybe a dust storm coming in, you just can't, accurately say we're going to be able to deliver within a certain time window at least on a micromobility vehicle. So e-bikes might be out of the question. But the demand, I think, is quite strong, at least from what we see kind of coming in to Joyride. There's quite a lot of enthusiastic entrepreneurs that want to get involved in Saudi Arabia. So I'm assuming the demand's there because it's described quite a lot. A couple more before we have to sign off. Try to rattle through these a little bit. Kind of already answered that one. Okay, this one back to kind of Whizz. How are you dealing with rider and business fleet insurance? From recent experience, underwriters are currently considering policies as, quote, specialty insurance, and the premiums and the terms seem to kind of be reflecting that. I'm guessing that's probably reflecting that in a higher cost. Is there a certain kind of insurance product that you look for, Ksenia, when it comes to those offerings to your gig workers or customers you service?
Well, in terms of fleet insurance, I mean, actually, when we deal with the insurance of electric bikes or electric bikes business in the United States, particularly in New York City, it's not that easy. So insurance companies are pretty traditional. They do not want to deal with any type of vehicles except of cars. It's really hard to find a company, especially an insurance company, especially when you're a startup, that would agree to provide you with insurance. So of course we have the fleet insurance for our locations. But if we talk about insuring our customers, for example, and a delivery driver comes to us to rent an electric bike, it's very hard to find a company that will insure the delivery driver risk if they break the bike or they damage some third-party vehicle and so on. So for this part, we take this insurance on ourselves. So we provide the protection plan service for our customers, and if they purchase this, then in case of some breakdowns, we will just decrease to a certain extent the responsibility. So for the fleet, we use the insurance companies, but for the insuring of our electric bikes when they are rented out to the customers, we take it as our responsibility. We do not deal with any insurance companies there.
Okay, well, there's a couple more questions, but we are at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's schedule today. I want to say thank you to Jonah and Ksenia for joining me today. And just the remaining time, if you wouldn't mind telling the audience where they can follow you guys or kind of check out your services in the future, feel free to plug away. Jonah, if you want to kind of kick that off.
Yeah, the best place would be sign up for our weekly newsletter on the industry at www.thecurbivore.com, spelled same way as under my face right here.
Yes, for me, you can find me on LinkedIn using my name. I think it's will be pretty simple to find me there.
Perfect. And if you ever want to deliver goods in New York City, you know who to rent your bike from. Okay. And as a reminder to the audience, we'll be sending a follow-up email with a recording link for this webinar in case you have friends or colleagues who couldn't make it for the live show. We'd love for them to be able to kind of get a taste of this. But with that, that's kind of all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.